We will, apologies about that. We will call the Special Committee on Reducing Red Tape to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call us the order by calling the roll?
Alderwoman Spencer. Present. Alderman Narayan. Here. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Velasquez.
Here.
Alderwoman Sanye.
Present.
Chair Oldenburg.
Present.
Alderwoman Keys. You have 6 present. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Thursday, February 8th, 2024.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Aye. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Velasquez.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
We have 6 ayes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Welcome, everyone. We have one item on the agenda today, and that is to review and discuss and take public comment on additional public comment, I might add, on Board Bill 60 Committee Substitute as amended. I will allow the sponsor to approach the podium and put the bill before us.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. At this point, we have a second committee substitute that was emailed to everyone yesterday. It's in the drive. At this point, I would move that we adopt Board Bill 60 Committee Substitute as amended. Yeah, 2. Sure, yeah, the second iteration that's in the drive.
Squared, yes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are we adopting or are we discussing? I object, so we can have some discussion on the substitute or adopting it.
Yeah, the motion I'm entertaining is to put that committee substitute board bill as amended in front of us for discussion. Adoption is what the word he used, but you're right. I think you meant, put the bill in front of
I'd like
us
to discuss it.
for discussion.
Yes.
Correct. Okay, so we'll amend that motion as necessary. Great. For the minutes. Beautiful.
All right.
Proceed, Alderman.
Now that we have this properly in front of us, just to go over the changes in the second committee substitute from the first committee substitute. We have, if you look at page 13, we've added a definition of the term nightclub. I think that was important just to lay out that term as a defined term, to be clear that we are not, this is not for nightclubs. You don't fall under the restaurant bar licensure if you are a nightclub. We also, on page 20, added that convenience stores, motor fuel pumping stations, packaged liquor stores, and nightclubs cannot be considered restaurant bars. Page 21, we added that no restaurant bar can sell alcohol beyond midnight, and food has to be available for consumption at all times when alcohol is served. That was after a lot of discussion with various neighborhood groups. We wanted to make sure that we didn't have a situation where dinner service ends at 8 p.m., but the bar is open till 1:30. This helped to alleviate some of those concerns, because if you are operating a restaurant, the burden here may be that you have to have a late night menu, something like that. But we're also seeing, just in general in that industry, less and less move towards late night service of either food or alcohol, frankly. We also modified the size of restaurant bar from 5,000 to 4,000 feet. That was another ask of the neighborhood associations. We changed that. On page 23, we modified some language. We're using the term occupant, but we wanted to eliminate confusion between this board bill and building permits. So we use the term resident instead for clarity. We also changed the language so that we're using voter registration as a baseline, but you're able to provide alternatives to show that you live there. So if you think about this on plat, the denominator of the fraction would be the residence, but if someone was to show up on the door looking for your signature, and they were expecting to find Alderman Oldenburg, but instead they found Alderwoman Velasquez, who lives there because Alderman Oldenburg has moved out. If Alderwoman Velasquez can say that if she can show, utility bills, anything like that, then she can be considered.
Who doesn't know?
I'm sorry?
If I could just have a point of clarification, there's a lot of files in the drive, and I've asked for clarification on which file is the one that is the amended as amended. So as you get going through this, I want to make sure I'm going through the right file.
I believe that the file is called BB60CS2, I believe. CSAA2.
I have a C. I don't think
It was also emailed to you.
There's a lot of. There's just a lot of files in here, Alderman, so I just was looking for the specific right one, so we're all looking at the same.
It's under item 4, board bills,
Yep.
1A, BB60CS, mark copy new 2.pdf.
Okay, that's the one I was looking at, but it has an odd name, so, and I wasn't following exactly where you are, so I appreciate clarifying here.
Sure.
No problem. Thank you, Alderwoman. Please proceed, Alderman.
All right, so, then we also looked at how the excise commissioner would look at nuisance violations and any city violations to prevent anyone that had nuisance property or current city violations from getting licenses. We also laid out that the excise commissioner shall consider the same factors that they do with plat and petition, with the exception of signatures for both the initial hearing and the final determination, which is the neighborhood detriment standard. So it includes everything. It includes explicit penalties for lying on the application, revocation and denial of licenses, requires that a restaurant bar provides evidence that 51% of their sales come from food at the 6-month mark. And all of the additional criteria that the excise commissioner has to take into account for plat and petition, the concerns about loitering, additional noise. I think there's 13 something like that factors that need to be taken into account under the detriment standard. Then on page 68, we extended the time that applicants have to post public placard to make sure that the mail could get to the people within the plat. So the excise commissioner will mail to people within the plat a postcard with notification of the hearings from the initial and all the way through the final determination. So there will be adequate notice to everyone who lives inside that plat if they check their mail. And then lastly, on page 137, we removed the emergency clause and gave a 6-month effective date on this to ensure that excise was able to take care of everything that they needed to in order to get this up and running. Be happy to take any questions on the committee substitute at this point. We've lost our chairman, so, yes, Madam Vice Chair.
Do you want to do testimony, public testimony after this discussion before we go through the amendments?
Whichever the committee would prefer. I have two amendments that I want to bring, but I guess we would need to adopt this before we could amend it. So I don't think it makes sense to try and do the amendments right now because we have not yet adopted the committee sub as amended too.
If I may, I think I'll state my preference, which would be to have the discussion on the committee substitute, hear your two amendments, and then maybe hear from the public. And then I have a few amendments to offer as well.
Do you think
But
we should probably do all the amendments at once though, so it's less confusing? So either public testimony and then amendments, or?
sure. Yep. I
And
think
I'm happy to lay out what my amendments are, just because I know there's some folks from the neighborhood association here who may seek to address this in their comments. We had some internal disagreement at the Board of Aldermen as to the threshold for the restaurant bars, whether that should be at 50% or 60%. The mayor has been asking people to support that number at 50%, or excuse me, at 60, has been asking people to support that number at 50%. I had talked to the neighborhood associations about putting forward amendments to push that to 60%. And so that's what my amendments are. I know that that may be something that people disagree on, so that's why that's not in this committee substitute, and I was bringing them as amendments so that it wasn't a make or break issue on the threshold here. But I am committed to putting forward those two amendments at a time when we are taking up amendments. I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that.
Madam Vice Chair, if you may, I think that the sponsors proposed a cadence here to have this adopted, hear from the public, and then discuss amendments would work well in this case. But I would like to ask a few questions about the substitute.
Can I ask a question for process sake as well? I just think, is it possible that some of the public can get access to these amendments? I have some folks, some media kind of reaching out, wanting to see what we're discussing as well. Maybe the clerk or someone could just make some additional copies and we could make those available for people who are here to see what we're discussing.
Sure, and these are not my amendments. Only the first two are, so I'm not in a position to deal with the remaining amendment.
Okay, so the clerk is going to make some copies of the amendments for the group, and then we'll go to questions. So I'll go in order of seniority. Let's start with Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you, Alderman Narayan. I'm really grateful to be here today to have these considerations on the committee substitute and additional amendments. With the risk of kind of going, I don't want to go line by line, but I know we were on the floor of the Board of Aldermen on Friday. There were a series of 18 amendments. Are each of those amendments included in the committee substitute verbatim?
So no, not verbatim, because there was some just language changes, and then the two amendments regarding the 50% or 60% are not in the committee sub also either, because I have those two amendments filed.
With the exception of those two amendments that we're going to consider subsequent, so were 16 of the 18 amendments included right from the list that we received on Friday?
Well, so there were I believe 16 amendments that were brought on Friday that I had. There were some amendments that other people have that that were not put into this at the moment. And really, those amendments addressed a smaller number of substantive issues. The amendments were there to clean up language. So, like, for example, we have amendment number 1 and amendment number 2 here. And so, even though they're getting to the same issue, the reason that there are 2 amendments is because they are 47 pages apart in this to change the 2. So even though there were 16 amendments, there were not 16 individual issues. A lot of those there was a much smaller number of actual issues to address. Some of those were just cleaning up typos. Some of them were in numerous places in the document. A specific thing needed to be changed.
Thank you, Alderman. I guess what I'm trying to get at, since we've got 150.
If what you're asking is the spirit of all of those amendments there? Yes. Is it there verbatim? No.
So the 16 amendments we had on Friday are largely in this bill, but there's been some small tweaks to them.
No.
I'm just trying to figure out where the starting point is. I just want to understand if we're looking at exactly, I just want to understand if we have all the amendments from Friday in this.
All of the amendments, everything that I intended to bring as an amendment on Friday is in this bill, with the exception of amendment number 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Is there any other additional amendments beyond what we had on Friday that are included in this committee substitute? Just so we have a clear understanding of the starting point of where we were on Friday.
No. This is if we had gone through on Friday and adopted every amendment.
Okay.
This is where we would be.
Okay, thank you. That is very helpful. I have no more questions. I just wanted to understand what the starting point was from the committee substitute. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Chair, all of the above.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. No questions. Alderwoman Keys is going to be excused. Vice Chair Velasquez. Okay. Alderwoman Saunier.
No questions. I just would reiterate what I said on Friday's meeting. Just, I really appreciate you making the effort to make the amendments and to address the community concerns and even being willing to bring it back to committee. I think this is when our legislative process works best. And so I just want to say that again. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I have no further questions either, Alderman, other than to also commend you on your willingness to compromise and have a efficient conversation, which is why I think everyone agreed to send it back to committee and hear again from the public as well. So without further ado, let's go to that business and then we can get into the amendments, if that's all right with you.
All right. Thank you.
Excellent. If everyone who has signed in, either opposed or in favor, would you just mind raising your right hand now and the clerk can swear everybody in at one time? Very good. All yeses. Good job, Madam Clerk.
I have been, I'm sorry about the last name, Parimba. You have 3 minutes. And that is in support of Board Bill 60 Committee Sub as amended.
So I'm here. My name is Ben Poremba. I'm a owner of several restaurants in the city. Opening new restaurants in this coming year. 6 of them in Shamim's ward, right between on Delmar, right between Union and Kings Highway, on both north and south sides of the street. I'm just here in general support of this bill. I think that many people in my position, restaurant owners, chefs, entrepreneurs, would be very appreciative if this process is much more efficient and make the city far more attractive. I'm also here to answer any questions. I'm sure that you've spoken with many people just like me. If there are any questions specifically about details of sales, the percentages of sales of food versus liquor, if there's nitty-gritty restaurant operations that may help you understand why some of those things are very, very important and why some of those details, seem to people like me very, very tedious and superfluous, So, any questions? All right, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your testimony and comments.
Mr. Jim Dyer. In opposition.
Actually, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Excuse me. Actually, we debated, those of us who were here to add to the conversation today, debated whether we were showing up in opposition or in favor. We didn't know. We're supportive of the current form of the bill, but we have some thoughts about additional issues we believe should be considered. And so I want to thank you for this unexpected opportunity to offer additional testimony regarding Board Bill 60. As you may recall, many of us who testified previously in the matter, and I'm going all the way back to August of last year, were opposed to elimination of the conventional plat and petition process. But we have adapted, and we're now focused on helping to shape the best possible bill that is currently under consideration. I am very pleased to advise that in the short time since we last met on this a week or so ago, I and others representing a broad and growing alliance of city neighborhood groups have engaged in very productive dialogue with Alderman Narayan and Sarah Baker regarding proposed amendments to Board Bill 60, many of which were agreed to and are now embodied in the latest committee substitute and on version of this bill. We're appreciative of the cooperative spirit that characterized that exercise and are hopeful that it might set the stage for similar engagement on a variety of important matters going forward. While much was accomplished, there remain several matters, some of which we believed had been we had reached agreement on, that I thought coming into this meeting were not included in the committee substitute bill that is before you, but now I'm not sure. The 4,000 square foot issue I thought we had resolved, and apparently we now have, if you're at 4,000 feet. Yeah, it's at 4,000. Okay, there was a little confusion on that one. But so we are presenting today we're proposing for your consideration several additional amendments described in materials that I believe, according to Alderwoman Spencer, are up on the drive.
Yes. And we actually have printed copies here as well.
All right, good. So they're there for you to refer to whenever that is appropriate. I am going to focus briefly on proposed Amendment 2 on our list, and two of my colleagues will follow to testify regarding the other proposed amendments. Amendment number 2 on our list, which we believed was agreed on, concerns certification of food sales, both minimum dollar volume and percentage of gross sales required to qualify under the restaurant bar category, which we propose should be $300,000 in annual food sales, 60% of gross sales volume.
I'm sorry, Mr. Dyer.
Yes.
That's your time.
We're going to allow a couple
Okay.
only because he gushed over the cooperation that we're all having here today. So, Mr. Dwyer, please continue.
Theme building. I think
Absolutely. Please continue.
And I have much more, so thank you for that courtesy. I appreciate that. So we believe that the threshold of minimum food sales annually for qualification under this category, the bar restaurant category, should be $300,000. And that of that number, or of the gross sales, 60% should be in the form of food sales as opposed to alcohol. We submit that this is a reasonable standard in that establishments that are truly food-focused would be expected to generate 60% or more of their sales from food versus alcohol, and that $25,000 a month in food sales is a reasonable expectation for a true restaurant versus other establishments that might offer more limited food service. We also propose that satisfaction of both of the minimum requirements, annual food volume of 300,000 and minimum of 60% food sales be required for qualification as a bar restaurant. And that's one other point that we discussed in our engagement with the Alderman and Ms. Baker The distinction is whether the word and or should be in the document, whether it's both standards have to be satisfied for certification purposes. So we would ask you to consider that. Thank you for listening to my testimony. You'll hear from my colleagues on other matters on that list. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dwyer.
Mr. Kelly, undetermined. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for the opportunity of readdressing some of the issues in this board bill. I just wanted to speak briefly. I won't repeat things that I've said at other hearings. I do want to introduce myself just briefly again. My name is Joe Kelly. We work with clients throughout the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County on liquor license applications. So just my testimony to this afternoon is I got a copy of some of these amendments for this board bill, and I think it is very important when we're passing legislation that involves businesses, public, that a lot of these things are very clear, because implementing these policies and left up to the determination of bureaucrats or perhaps the interpretation of the city attorney on some loosely worded ordinances creates a lot of confusion in trying to implement and try to move forward and help businesses and help the general public that have to deal with the fallout of this. So I appreciate the committee taking up and taking another look at some of the details in this ordinance, and I think that's very important to kind of sew up some of these details. We appreciate that. And in support of the amended, these amendments that I received, I don't know where they fall in the revised version of this ordinance at this point. I know that's what this meeting today is about, but I'm in support of the version that I have here in front of me that I think is being proposed this afternoon, some of these changes. Thank you very much.
Miss Sarah Baker? Oh, that's the, did you want to?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Baker. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff for Mayor Jones. I'm going to keep this very short. I just want to say the reason that we didn't change or agree to the threshold change is simply what other municipalities do around us. Brentwood, St. Louis County, Clayton, et cetera, are all at the 200,000, 50% mark. So that is what we would like to stay with and not become a regional outlier. Other than that, we worked hard, did lots of amendments. I think we've got general consensus on this, so open to any questions you might have.
Any questions for the representative from the mayor's office? Just raise your hand. Go ahead, Alderwoman Saunier.
Thank you. Nice to see you. I just had a question. I know you mentioned the 51% wanting to maintain that because it'll make us an outlier. I'm also curious, is that because you also are you all concerned that it might not, there's some businesses who might need this type of policy to get their liquor license that they might not be able to open if we go to a 60% threshold?
We think it poses the potential for sort of a discriminatory policy. We think that keeping the threshold at 50% means if you have a restaurant in the county, you have the same expectation to come to the city. We also made it required, though, that you show that 51% of sales at the 6-month mark. By and large, we know that restaurants tend to exceed that. But again, we didn't see a reason to make our city an outlier in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. You're going to stick around during the amendment process in case there's any questions we can facilitate through excise or excise through you. Thank you.
Les Stearman? In opposition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Les Sturman. I live at 1120 Locust Street, St. Louis. Just for the record, we reiterate our opposition to removing the Platten petition for restaurant bars. However, we understand based on the vote at the last committee meeting, that ship has sailed. So our purpose, as Jim Dwyer said before me, is to advocate for amendments that make Board Bill 60 less threatening to our neighborhoods. In that regard, I want to thank, as others have, Alderman Ryan for being open to amendments that get us pretty close to that objective. However, in our opinion, there are still some weaknesses, potential omissions, and loopholes that need to be addressed. Jim Dwyer addressed the issue of accounting for food sales, which we think is probably the biggest issue. And I want to address 3 additional amendments. Amendment 1 would add a definition for banquet halls to the bill and prohibit such establishments from qualifying as restaurant bars, much like you've already done for convenience stores, gas stations, nightclubs, etc. The definition would only include establishments whose primary function is a banquet hall, not for a restaurant that has some space set aside to host occasional events. Amendment 5 addresses an important ambiguity in the bill as it's currently written. Generally, the standard for obtaining and renewing a liquor license is that the establishment will not be a detriment to the surrounding neighborhood. While the bill now contains language for the excise commissioner to consider the detriment standards in deciding to grant a license, does not require him to make a formal finding. Such a finding is needed in the case of a court challenge or a protest petition. So this amendment simply would require the excise commissioner, after considering the various detriment factors, to issue a formal finding. Amendment 6 addresses a potential major loophole in the committee substitute. While the bill now prohibits an applicant from obtaining a license if they owe taxes or operate a nuisance property in the city, we found that applicants often form a separate LLC for the subject establishment. So a newly formed LLC could not owe taxes or operate a nuisance property by definition. However, the owner or members of the LLC could certainly owe taxes or operate a nuisance property. So we suggest that page 66, line 6, that the language should be broadened to apply to an applicant, affiliate, or member of the applicant. Lastly, I think we should be honest about the capacity of the excise division to handle certain new responsibilities, such as verifying compliance with the food sales requirement, among others. This puts a burden on the surrounding neighborhoods to use the tools that the bill provides to address problem establishments. So it's important that the bill provides and reinforces these tools rather than thank you for considering the suggestions that we've had throughout this process. Ones you'll consider today. Thank you.
Adam Rustick. In opposition.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak. I am the president of the Lindenwood Park Neighborhood Association, and I'm also working with these 2 gentlemen back here with the group of neighborhoods that are, I guess, working together to give feedback to the city as far as this legislation goes. I'd like to thank Sarah Baker and Alderman Narayan for meeting with us. I thought that was great. I really appreciate them having some opportunities for some conversations and being willing to make some amendments to the legislation. And I was really happy to see the legislation come back to this committee. I have to admit, after February 8th, I was a little disheartened, and I was glad to see it came back to this body and more opportunities for additional discussion and public input. So based on the sheet that was provided, I'm going to talk about amendments 3 and 4. Amendment 3 is restaurant bar minimum operating requirements. Given that the purpose of Board Bill 60 is to promote restaurant activity in the city and not to promote nightclub activity, and given that restaurants are generally open for more intensive hours of operation than nightclubs, there should be a minimum number of hours/days a restaurant bar must be open to qualify and retain a restaurant bar license. So in this case, we'd be asking for a minimum of 4 days a week of lunch and dinner, when alcohol is served. Then for amendment 4, which would be no expansion beyond 4,000 square feet. So we do appreciate that the maximum size of the restaurant / bar was lowered from 5,000 feet to 4,000 feet. But per section 14.01.400, Restaurant bars are supposed to be limited to no more than 4,000 square feet in size. However, Section 14.03.210 allows non-material changes to any premises with a liquor license, including adding up to 5,000 square feet. That would push the maximum size of the restaurant bar to 9,000 square feet. 14.01.400 should be amended to ensure that a restaurant bar cannot exceed beyond 4,000 square foot of minimum, 4,000 square foot maximum using 14.03.210. So those are the two items that I'd like to bring to your attention. Thank you.
And that concludes our members of the public.
Sure. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, you're recognized.
Thank you so much. If the mayor of Central West End, Mr. Dwyer, could answer this question, or either of the other members that stood up and spoke and echoed Mr. Dwyer's. I just have one quick question. You didn't hear me call you the mayor of Central West End. You know that's what we call you.
Pardon me?
The mayor of Central West End.
Lowercase.
I just had a quick question. Again, I am so encouraged by this meeting today and all of the comments that have been made thus far. But I do have a question about the reference that's been made to the working group, the neighborhood working group. Can you just give me a description of where these neighborhoods are from, or maybe even name some of them, and specifically north and south, east and west, where its representation is from?
I can, and these gentlemen can elaborate on that. So this was an alliance that evolved out of, I think, I don't know whether it began with the short-term rental bill or the unhoused bill, but there was enough conversation going on among a broad group of people that we found ourselves communicating, and we realized that at that point, I think there were about a dozen neighborhood organizations that were represented in the group that was conversing about whatever the topic of the day was. And they were basically from the Central West End south and downtown, heavy emphasis on downtown. We are very conscious of geography and demographics, and we have a conscious effort underway to expand our turf to include the entire city. And former Alderman Page has been reaching out on our behalf in a couple of areas north, and has succeeded in gaining some traction there. But right now, I would say that the vast majority of those people represented in our group are from the Central Corridor south. Anything you want to add?
Okay, with that, Alderman, if you maybe want to proceed back up to the podium, and then I will entertain motions on the amendments, probably starting with yours, Alderman.
Do we still have to pass the committee substitute? We have to adopt the committee.
That's a quick question here, Madam Clerk. Do we need to adopt the committee substitute as amended before adding amendments? I believe so, correct?
We did adopt the committee substitute at
I think that the motion was.
I have a.
Well, the motion was to, I guess, put it before us for discussion. I don't know if that is an adoption, so maybe we'll just make a motion. I'll entertain a motion to formally adopt now.
If I did have, if you don't mind.
Sure, you're recognized, Alderwoman.
Thank you. Just a matter of additional clarification. When we were discussing some of the amendments, Mr. Breyer brought up 4,000 square feet. That was not part of the set of amendments that we had before us on Friday.
That was one. There was one amendment for that on Friday.
I thought it was 5,000 square feet on
No,
Friday.
5,000 was the original bill, and then after discussion with the neighborhood groups, they had requested that we go down to 4,000 feet, and so we put together an amendment to reduce the footage to 4,000.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
For sure.
Okay, I'm entertaining that motion now to officially adopt Board Bill 60, Committee Substitute as amended.
Second.
Second, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's adopted. Alderman, let's proceed with these amendments, if you will, please.
Sure. So I think it makes sense to take amendment number 1 and 2 together, because a vote to change one without changing the other the bill would not be in harmony with itself. This is the discussion that we've had on where the threshold is. We've heard from, I think, we've heard really good points on both sides, I think, on the 51% or 60%. We've heard the administration and others say that everywhere else in the region is at 50%. I think that the neighborhood associations, when I was speaking with them, I said, I'm happy to bring an amendment to 60%. They had originally wanted it to be higher than that. This was a compromise that we had reached. So I am making good on my promise here and bringing the amendment to 60%. I don't think that this is unduly burdensome. I'm hearing otherwise, but I think that this is part of the spirit of the compromise that we have been trying to show here, and so I would ask for your favorable consideration on amendments number 1 and 2.
Excellent. We need a motion, though, to.
If you don't mind, if we're going to discuss on the.
Well, I'd like to have a motion, and we can have discussion before we take the vote.
I make a motion that we adopt amendments 1 and 2.
I'd like to break the motion into 2.
It's fine. It's been
Okay, I make a
requested that we divide the question. Let's take them one at a time. The motion was to adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 60, Committee Substitute as amended from Alderwoman Saunier. Is there a second?
Second.
By Alderwoman Spencer. Let's have some discussion. We're going to go in order of seniority for discussions, whether these are questions to the individual bringing the amendment, is how I would like that discussion to take place. Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to add that I think having a 60% threshold is something that I've been hearing overwhelmingly from neighborhoods that they support. I would also like to add that in talking with representatives from the restaurant community that has been supported, I spoke this morning with Danny Eichelhorst, and I understand that the 60% threshold is one that was a good compromise. And I again want to, just kind of reiterate what the neighborhoods are saying here. I join my colleagues in a real, I feel very great about today's hearing. This really feels very constructive, and I want to commend the sponsor and the chair and everybody who's here today on that. And I believe this is in that spirit, as you pointed out, as the sponsor and as the person who's been leading those conversations, to be in the spirit of that compromise. And with that, I ask my colleagues for their favorable consideration on it. If we need to, if it is, and I will add as well that if it's found to be onerous, especially in this next first year where this pretty significant change to how liquor licenses can be obtained in the city, if it's found to be onerous, I stand willing, ready, and at the moment to change this if necessary, and if there's good cause to do that.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Let's see. Next is Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Thank you so much. So out of respect for everybody's responsibility we have down here to represent our wards and our neighborhoods, our constituents. But I'll add to that, even sometimes, and some of us have to work a little harder at this, at courting and marketing our neighborhoods as potential sites for people to come and introduce in entrepreneurship and restaurants. And that's why I specifically asked you, Mr. Dwyer, that question, because the neighborhoods that I represent north, and I know people like to play around with these north and south, divides or whatever. But the reality is the representation in that group is not, the threshold piece is not the representation that I received. And it's not the representation from newer restaurants that are coming that here we have fought to try to get to come to these spaces north of whatever line people want to make up again and play with. So I think the reality is that in comparison and in marketing, I know it was thrown around that there was just the administration, but the reality is I've heard from other people outside of the administration more than the administration on this piece, because they understand, again, Mr. Dwyer, you said we're adapting, right? And the adaptation piece of this piece of legislation probably is one of the most I've seen down here at the Board of Aldermen. So I just want to stand, again, I'm in opposition to this. I want to keep it at where it is. I want to keep it in a place where I can go and try to market. I want people to come and open their restaurants in the 10th Ward, in the other North Wards, and any kind of barrier or excuse that people can use to say no is more of an uphill battle for us. Again, we don't have that problem in some of the neighborhoods that are clearly represented in the working group. But again, the responsibility that we all have down here for our individual neighbors and our constituents, and hopefully potential constituents that are listening and say, hey, this is looking like maybe I want to come open my restaurant over there. And that is why I, I stand in opposition to these amendments. Thank you.
And if I could just address that for 1 second. I want to be very clear here that the intent of this is certainly to lower those barriers. I hope that it's not perceived that this legislation is trying to make it any harder for anyone to open a restaurant in any part of our city, because I think one of the things that makes our city great is the food scene, all over the place, and from every part of the world, that we have restaurateurs coming in and doing business here, and the spirit of this is certainly to aid in that process. That being said, I certainly do understand.
I was at it.
Excellent. Next, Alderwoman Tyus, do you want to speak to this amendment? I see you're on, and before I move forward down in seniority, I know better. You're the most senior here, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to this amendment if you wanted. There she is. Alderwoman Tyus, did you want to speak or ask the sponsor any questions to this amendment? Okay. Well, then let's move on. Vice Chair Velasquez.
Thank you. And thank you, Alderman Narayan, for all your hard work on this. And I do want to thank the members of the public that are here and that continue to show up and enthusiastically participate in this process on this bill. I do want to echo, I think, some of the statements that my colleague, Alder Lady Clark Hubbard, talked about. And I think one of the things that strikes me about this amendment is, I think one of the things that we constantly battle in the city and in the region is this fragmentation, and it is everywhere. And so as the Red Tape Committee, I feel like adding one more thing that is slightly different than what is happening around us doesn't do that. It goes against kind of the concept of streamlining this. So I would like to see us kind of stay with what's happening around the region, because this is one of those things that specifically we've been trying to address, and how to make it easier for businesses, but also to have them not have to redo everything and rethink everything when they come into the city.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Saunier.
Thank you, Chair Odenberg, Alderman Narayan. I think I would just echo some of the sentiments that have previously been expressed. I think when we're talking about representation, I'm curious in geographical geographical representation, as well as, I want to just tell the full truth because it is Black History Month, the racial representation, and even just the lived experience representation. The part of the community that I represent, a lot of our business owners are immigrants. They have language barriers. They have challenges that I'm just not sure that, I just think it's very important when we're having these conversations that people with a variety of different experiences and dealing with a number of challenges when not just coming here, but trying to open business and mobilize themselves economically are struggling with. And so for me, I'm happy to hear that you all are going to be like actively expanding you all's group and coalition, because I think, one of the things that I try really hard to do and say all the time is, I want to be an alderwoman for all. And so I want to always be pushing myself to think about what are experiences that people are having that I may not be able to connect to. And in this process, especially as this bill come up, I've had business owners who are very concerned about these changes. These are big changes to a process that they've been used to. But I've also heard conversations from business owners, whether they may be Latina or African or Palestinian or just different regions, really saying, but listen, I've really been struggling. I've been in your community for a long time. I've been doing everything and I'm having trouble navigating your process. And so for me, I just, I really want to see the table expanded when we're having these conversations, because it would just give me a lot more confidence to make some of these changes and have these conversations, knowing that we're having them. And I think it's okay to say, this is what my community is used to and this is where we find our voice. But I think it's a way to say that and to also say that we understand there are certain groups that are challenged, whether that's racially, economically, or number of reasons. So I would just say, just re-echo what was uplifted before. And I think for that reason, I too will be voting against amendment number 1. It does seem nominal to me. It is a 9% difference. And also when I hear that this is what other areas are doing and they don't seem to be having a lot of problems, it doesn't seem to me something that is going to make or break the policy or make or break the legislation. But if the goal is to reduce the red tape, I think let's start here. And like, you didn't end up proposing the 19 amendments, but I know those are in this bill now. And so those have been incorporated. And I kind of just, for now, I want to support leaving it there and see how this works.
Thank you very much, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Tyus, can you hear us now?
I can, but I didn't hear much of what was going on because it went in and out, and all of a sudden now I am. So I'm not sure. Are you all actually voting on an amendment?
Yeah, right now, if we can get volume up on her, we're not hearing you so loud. It's pretty quiet, but we are entertaining Amendment 1. We're entertaining Amendment 1 to the Board Bill Committee Substitute as amended, which is looking to increase the threshold of food sales from 51% to 60%. So I don't know if you had a question for the sponsor on that amendment specifically, or a statement you wanted to make around that amendment.
I had questions and statements, but I don't think it's fair for me to come in and try to get in the middle. So I'm going to get back out and just.
Okay.
So this keeps going mute, unmute. So I don't know what's going on. So I'm going to get off and then I'll watch it afterwards and then try to talk to the sponsor. Thank
Excellent.
You for giving me a chance to speak.
You bet, Alderwoman. It's very gracious of you. Thank you. Technology sometimes can be a barrier, but we're in good stead. Okay. Alderman, I have a question for you specific to this amendment. So we do know, and it is verified, that in cities and municipalities in St. Louis County, that this very threshold is 51%. Is that correct?
Yes, the administration had dug in around different municipalities in St. Louis County and then St. Charles, I believe, as well, to ask, to figure out what their threshold was on similar license structures, and 51% seems to be the threshold regionally. Sarah Baker may be able to shed.
No, I take your word for it, and I think that's probably right, and I appreciate that. I certainly am never one to create a business disadvantage, right? If a restaurant's looking to open up in the region and they have a choice between the city or the county, and it's easier to get a liquor license in the county, my guess is that might be a decision they make. However, I think in St. Louis County and those municipalities, there is probably greater liquor control and enforcement, and there likely are less issues when there is a problem or there could be a problem arising. So I think that's a distinction that I would like to make. Additionally, the neighborhood associations, I think, would like a little additional or padded coverage. This is sort of a piece of legislation that I think they initially frightened a lot of neighborhood associations. And I always want to tend to agree with neighborhood associations, the police, especially the ones I represent. And I applaud their cooperation and their spirit of compromise in all of this. So I do think I want to reserve my vote on this so that we can give that little extra protection to those neighborhood associations. These are folks that volunteer countless hours so that they can keep the fabric of their neighborhood and a quality of life that they elect, quite honestly, in most neighborhoods. So I certainly would be in support of these amendments as they are written. So feel free to
Sure, with that.
close, unless there's further discussion. Hang on.
Thank you. I'm so glad you referenced that about the ones that we're elected to represent, because I know that Lindenwood is that in your?
It is not anymore.
No, it's
Okay, you guys.
And we miss them greatly.
You guys have all the fun. Are we accepting any public comment? I'm only asking because we do have a restaurateur here, Mr. Paramba, and I didn't know if I understand the value of the neighborhood organizations. I think associations, I do. And that's why I love the committee part. But I think for our colleagues and for people that are watching, I think if you would let maybe an additional 3 minutes from Mr. Paramba around this amendment as a restaurateur.
Yeah, we have had sort of the public comment session, but I'm inclined to make an exception if the restaurateur would like to speak sort of specifically on this amendment. If the sponsor has no objection,
I have no objection to that. That's at your discretion.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman.
I just want to illustrate a point about why this is actually really, really important. The inner workings of restaurants is as such that we've experienced serious rise in food cost. And there is a limit to what the public perception of what we can charge for our food. And so the margins for us are with liquor. It's just the reality of running restaurants post-pandemic. I'm going to give you an example. I run a very expensive James Beard award-winning restaurant where we charge, it's a tasting menu format. We charge hundreds of dollars for a meal. The portion of our wine pairings, which is what we're known for, it's what we're getting, awarded for, is more expensive than the wine. That restaurant would not qualify under your amendment. It just won't. More and more restaurants, and I'm not talking about just restaurants that are very expensive like my own. I'm talking about more and more restaurants really have maximized what they can charge for food. The public is willing to pay more for liquor, and that's where those things make a difference. To your point, Alderman Oldenburg, the county doesn't have any stronger enforcement. I run restaurants in the county. My restaurants in Clayton is about 55% in food sales to 50% Bar Moral, if you know, it's a Spanish restaurant. So that restaurant would not qualify under this thing. Think of your corner bar, pub, neighborhood owner that have to sell frozen pizza to qualify for what you're asking. I mean, these people would not qualify under. These are not people that are trying to scam the system or come around or, so it's going to, it's going to be a hassle for people to try to push more food out. It's going to make it not equitable because now we're going to charge more for food. So those things are, if you the nitty-gritty of restaurants operations as such, those are the kinds of things that do make it less attractive to open a restaurant in the city. It's just it's what it is. Now, there's some restaurateurs out there that may think that they are okay with it, but why are we just not be okay with it and do something that actually pushes people and make people more attracted to come and open a restaurant in the city. But I'm just giving you some illustrations, both very high-end restaurants, your typical corner bar owner that, you know, lives off of the Bud Lights and the Stags and needs to sell tons of frozen pizza in order to qualify for this. This just doesn't make any sense. So anyway.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind, and we're sort of the theme here is unorthodox, but it took time to be here, so would you mind entertaining some questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Velasquez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Poremba, again for speaking. Can you just maybe just talk about your experience? I'm not a restaurant owner, nor have I played one on TV. It's my bad joke. But can you just talk a little bit about what it's like for you to kind of navigate different, as a restaurant owner, as a business owner, navigate different laws, like from city to county? I mean, because this would be, again, it seemingly a small change, but I mean, obviously there are different requirements for like between a mile apart. So does that affect your business operations? Does it affect how you?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I'll just give you an example. I opened 2 restaurants within 4 months difference, one in the county and one in the city. Deli Divine at the Delmar Divine development, and I opened Bar More in Clayton. It took me all of 3 weeks to obtain my liquor license in the county. It took me about 9 months to get my liquor license in the city. It cost me all but $1,800 for my lord. Joe Kelly was here earlier. It cost me about $6,000 by the time the process was done too. So yes, it's absolutely a disadvantage that the city is having with having to navigate bureaucracy. So I'm very attuned to what neighborhood associations are. You know, we are opening those restaurants for communities. We're not opening the restaurant. I'm not opening a restaurant on Delmar, so people from Ladue and Chesterfield would drive to. I'd like them to drive to and attend, but we're opening restaurants for the community around us. So we definitely want the support and the. But I think that it's important that they understand also that, you know, we have choices, and you know, and it would be great if the choice would be obvious to conduct business in the city. It's not, and that's. So, you know, we have to fight perception of crime. We have to find all these stigma. We don't need to fight bureaucracy on top of it. I mean, that's the. You know, we have to make it as easy and as smooth and as attractive to do this. And this is an area where, you know, so. But any other questions?
Thank you. I appreciate it. I have no other questions.
Excellent. Alderman, you're recognized to close on the amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. Committee, I think we've heard solid arguments on both sides on this, and I certainly am not trying to disenfranchise anyone by bringing this amendment. The spirit of this overwhelmingly is to make it easier for people to do business in the city. I have told my neighborhood associations that I'm bringing this amendment. This was part of the spirit of compromise in the overall conversation that we had. So at this point, I would ask for your favorable consideration in adopting Amendment Number 1 to Board Bill Number 60, Committee Substitute as amended.
Excellent. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Spencer. Aye. Alderman Ryan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Aye. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Velasquez.
No.
Alderwoman Sanye.
No.
Chair Oldenburg.
Aye.
3 aye votes and 3 no votes.
With that, the motion to adopt Amendment 1 has failed. Alderman, please proceed with Amendment 2, if that is in order.
Well,
yeah.
Let me think here. I guess this is ultimately why I had wanted them to move in tandem, both Amendment 1 and 2, because it makes the bill would be incongruent with itself if we were to in one part of it raise the threshold to 60 while keeping it at 51 in the other. And I imagine that the vote count is going to be the same. So with that,
You'll withdraw Amendment 2
yeah, I'll withdraw Amendment number 2
for consideration. Okay. Thank you, Alderman. I think that's all your amendments, correct?
I believe, yes, that is the end of my amendments.
So I have other amendments here that I believe are from Alderwoman Spencer. So you're recognized to proceed with your amendments, Alderwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you like me to stand at the dais or?
Oh, it's dealer's choice, whatever you'd like to do.
Okay.
Seated, or you could
I'll stay
approach.
seated.
Okay.
Chair. I have a few amendments here, and as Mr. Dwyer and Mr. Rustage and Mr. Sturman pointed out, these were prepared by the group of neighborhood organizations. There's two sets of papers before you. One is the amendments in the format that is official, which was prepared by our counsel, Mr. Galley, and one of them has a set of justifications along with it, so much of which we heard from testimony from the folks here in the audience. But I'll go through the document, which is the official set of amendments, which you can identify with because it doesn't have justifications and it has 4 pages associated with it. So, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'll start with amendment number 4. I think amendment number, which was prepared as amendment number 3, was removed from our stacks.
Correct.
So, seeing that, with your permission, I'll move forward with a consideration of amendment number 4.
Yeah, before you do that and I entertain a motion, I just want to remind folks that with our newly adopted rules, the page numbers as well as the amendment numbers, it's the text here that we'll be discussing and amending. So there's no sort of got you or pinch point here. If the amendment doesn't match or a page number is off, it is the text of the amendment that will carry and will get fixed if it's adopted or not. So if everyone has the correct formatted packets in front of them, please let me know if you do not. We can proceed with entertaining a motion to adopt amendment number 4 to Board Bill 60, Committee Substitute as amended.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. What amendment number 4 would do is just add some additional language excluding banquet halls. I think this is very much in the spirit of what we've discussed. We've already eliminated, sort of like nightclubs and bar, bar onlys. So what this will do is just add the term banquet hall, which we've seen of, nightclub or things that are not restaurants. And so the idea here would be to exclude those entities, which are, sometimes nightclubs, et cetera, but identified as banquet halls. So this just adds that to the bill.
Okay. I'm still looking to entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt amendment number 4 to Board Bill number 60 as amended, Okay.
It's been moved. Is there a second? I will second. Been moved by Alderwoman Spencer, seconded by Alderman Oldenburg, that we adopt amendment number 4, amendment number 4, Board Bill 60, Committee Substitute as amended.
Okay.
Discussion, please proceed, Alderwoman.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. This just adds the term banquet hall, to those excluded from, so that, we're not providing a path without having a liquor, the Platinum petition for banquet halls. Again, what we've seen is that nightclubs have been identified as banquet halls, and so this is a way of protecting neighborhoods from, again, this is a bill to really, enhance or improve the process for restaurants, not banquet halls and nightclubs. So this just kind of tightens that up a little bit.
Okay. We're going to go through seniority here for comments and questions. Sponsor, Alderman Narayan.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not just out of hand opposed to this, but I don't see why it is necessary. I'm looking at the language here, and I don't see why a banquet hall would meet the standards here of the restaurant, unless it was, essentially a restaurant, because a banquet hall is primarily engaged in the lease or rental space. I mean, I'm concerned that we're opening a Pandora's box and definitions here of things that don't that this doesn't apply to, as opposed to looking at what it does apply to, and we're pretty clear about what it does apply to. That's my only concern. Thank you.
Oh, I will, in response to that, I'll say that if a banquet hall, if it is a restaurant, it would identify as a restaurant. What this does is really address event spaces that are not restaurants. So, right now we don't have a minimum sales and that sort of thing. So this is really just to address those event spaces that are not restaurants. Again, if they are a restaurant, they would fit the bill as defined as a restaurant. So we want to be able to catch, these event spaces that are not actually restaurants. So, it just adds an exclusionary definition, and if an entity is not a banquet hall, they would not identify as such, especially because under this they would be excluded. So if they're a restaurant, they would just identify as a restaurant, and your bill would apply.
Okay. Ryan, you're recognized to.
I do have one more question on banquet halls, and maybe Sarah may be able to answer this better than I can. But isn't there a separate banquet license that excise has regarding banquet halls and the sale of alcohol?
Regardless of that, what we're trying to avoid is event spaces, that are in event space, So, I don't see.
Like I said, I'm just trying to not open up a Pandora's box here, because a banquet hall is already not going to be able to apply for this. So, sure. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go to Vice Chair Velasquez. Any questions of the amendment sponsor or the bill sponsor, or comments on?
I have no questions or comments.
Great. Alderwoman Saunier.
I do have a question, but I think I might have just got the answer. But I just want to be clear that Alderwoman Spencer, you and the sponsor have not had any conversation. Did you reach out to him to talk to him about your amendments and what you would be proposing, or have you all had any discussion about these things?
I will say, I think, that these were communicated by the organizations and the neighborhood groups directly with the sponsor, and I'm sort of under this tight timeline. I recognize that the communication didn't come directly to all the, I have not specifically, having received these today, but they were provided to the committee, and again, we're under sort of a short timeline, and I understand that those conversations had taken place from the members of the general public that have been trying to engage further in the process. So,
but you and the sponsor hadn't talked directly.
Correct, as was the case for many of the other amendments, as far as I'm concerned, previously. But you're right, yes, to clarify that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Alderwoman Spencer, I have a couple of questions here as well on this. I want to make sure I understand. Is this to exclude maybe a restaurant that could qualify from being rented out for private party if it's under the 4,000 square feet and it otherwise qualifies, and there's no prohibition? Does it get classified as a banquet hall if it simply has a party or is rented out for private events?
That's an excellent question, Alderman, and my understanding is no, that does not apply. So to the sponsors' kind of concern there, if it's a restaurant, it's a restaurant, and if there's an event space associated with that restaurant, that shouldn't matter. It's still a restaurant that may have an event space. But in the case where it is just an event space,
Whereas the restaurant is doubling as an event.
Yeah, I mean, that does happen. I think,
Sure.
we see that at Fountain on Locust. They've got an event space upstairs. Lots of restaurants have event spaces. But they're still restaurants. I mean, Fountain on Locust is a restaurant, with an event space associated with it. This is just for those event spaces that, also may serve food. Or serve as a banquet hall or something that is providing for private parties, et cetera, but is not actually a restaurant. If it's a restaurant, it should apply for the bill and
Understood.
as a restaurant. And so this would be language that would just exclude banquet halls.
So this would be an establishment whose primary business
Correct.
is not being a restaurant or a bar or tavern, but is solely event space that has bookings 3 or 4 nights.
And again, this is just language that our community groups was looking to, shore up and add some additional clarity. I think to the sponsor's point, it should, hopefully not have a substantive impact, but rather just serve to clarify and further exclude just those event space, those spots that are event spaces.
Sure. Okay. That was the only clarity I was seeking. I have nothing further. Alderwoman, would you like to proceed to a vote?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan.
No.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Velazquez.
No.
Alderwoman Sanye. No. Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
2 aye votes and 3 no votes.
By the vote, you failed to sustain the motion to adopt board bill or amendment number 4 or number 3. I can't remember if it's 3 or 4.
Amendment number 4.
It was originally
Amendment
4.
number 5 is associated with
Yep.
it. So in
Witty
my
substitute.
the sponsor demurred on amendment
Yep.
number 2. I'd like to look at amendment number 6.
Okay.
What this does is Mr. Dwyer pointed out, and actually I think it does something to kind of address the sponsor's amendment number 1, shoring up a little bit more protections for communities. In light of the 50% food requirement, what this does is provide for having either 50% gross sales or the bill has an or with $200,000 worth of food sales or 50% gross sales. But what this will do is kind of change that to be an and what that will do is essentially, so Mr. Poremba was talking about these sort of high-end restaurants, I mean, this will allow for that threshold to kind of be applied on the smaller scale in protecting those smaller restaurants and allowing that 50%. But, if you are a higher end, if you have a lot more sales, for example, $1 million in sales, we want there to be a higher threshold there. And so that would, in fact, what this, I'm kind of, it clarifies that and allows for the 60% of total food and liquor sales for having a total, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm kind of reading through this, but an annual total gross income of at least $300,000 of sales from food, and that the sales be 60%. So it kind of, it is along the same spirit of the first 2 amendments by the sponsor, but I think it, would add some protections there.
Okay. let's entertain a motion to adopt amendment number 6.
So moved.
Moved, seconded.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt amendment number 6 to Board Bill 60 Committee to substitute as amended. Alderwoman, you can have some further discussion if you like. If not, I can go through members of the committee.
Please go through the members of the committee
Sure.
with questions, Mr. Chair.
Alderman Ryan.
Thank you, Chairman. We discussed both with the neighborhood group and I've discussed with the administration a very similar amendment to this that we ultimately decided against putting in the legislation for a couple of reasons. First, there's some concern about requiring a gross income of at least $300,000. That means if you have a slow start, we're going to essentially take your liquor license away, regardless of if there's any issues there. Additionally, the verification statement signed and prepared by a certified public accountant puts a vague cost onto entrepreneurs and puts us out of line with the rest of the region. The way that we are looking at addressing this issue, I think what the goal of this amendment is that excise is, and Ms. Baker may be able to shed more light on this, but excise is hiring on with the additional funds that they've gotten. They're hiring on someone who has the background to go through these numbers and records and ensure that they meet that. I guess it'll be 51% threshold, and I think that should account for this and police for that without putting an additional undue burden on the restaurateurs. If we're trying to reduce red tape, saying you have to hire your CPA to go through your receipts and sign off on something, I have no idea what that may cost, and that's not something that I feel comfortable pushing onto startup restaurants. Thank you.
Alderwoman, you're recognized to respond if you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hear your concerns. My concern would be that echoed by, Danny Eichelhorst and some of the folks in the restaurant industry, that these numbers are easily fudged. All you really have to do is, change an item in your point of sale system, and you can easily submit, any other set of numbers. So without any provisions or any repercussions of that, that was the concern that even fellow restaurateurs were having on this, with we just sort of submitting numbers. On the point on the 60% sales in the county, we are an outlier. Let's not, we're a city. We're different than St. Louis County, and we're different than St. Charles County. Restaurants in St. Louis County, the closest residential home is, is hundreds of feet away, and in the city, they're next door. It's a very different environment. We have a lot more amenities, a lot more walkability because of our density, but let's not pretend like we're St. Louis County or St. Charles. We're simply not. So, I think that I would like to see the higher threshold of sales, to be applied, on the food side, and some better protections to ensure that those are actually food sales. And to your point about excise hiring more folks, I hate to bring up the obvious, but we provided funding for that in June, and they still haven't been hired. That was passed part of the budget process, and it's March. So, with all due respect, I'd love to see our excise functioning better and have those people hired. We're coming on the next budget cycle. They were part of last budget cycle at this point, and we still don't have them in place. So, I'm hoping that we can at least provide, some better protection to our communities with that higher threshold and that sort of proof of point of sale.
Great. Okay, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, has she joined us on, Madam Clerk?
She is on there, but
Okay.
she's muted.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't have any questions or comments about this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Vice Chair Velasquez.
No questions.
Great. Alderwoman Saunier.
I don't have questions as much as a comment. I know also some of the amendments we saw on Friday, like I saw that this was a consideration, so I checked in with some businesses. I'm concerned because, again, I think that it's important when we think about the businesses that are coming to our city and that are trying to open up, that some of them are smaller scale when they start. And so, like, the justification in this says, per our research, viable restaurants that serve alcohol, i.e. not fast food restaurants, generate at least $500,000 in gross sales. I would caution us to categorize all of those restaurants as fast food restaurants. I think, Cherokee Street is a great example. Some of those places started off as like small, stand-up corners and then grew over time as they got more capital and got more funds to invest in their business. And so even though at one point their food sales might have been a little bit lower because they were just much smaller capacity, eventually they were growing. It's not that they were fast food, it's just a part of their trajectory of growing their business. And I think this just ties back to what I was mentioning earlier, being concerned about. Like, I really want to make sure that this bill is able to help all of the businesses who want to open, including those that for economic reasons or whatever, they have to start at a much smaller scale, but we don't just dismiss those. And I totally get the concerns about people wanting to get over the process, but there's also concerns of business owners who just have to start small and build from there to get to where they are. And I want to make sure that they have the ability to benefit from this bill as well. So I won't be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I'll only make the statement that's sort of in the same vein as my earlier comment, is that I think the spirit of this amendment is to ensure that a restaurant is a restaurant and doesn't become a tavern or just a point of sale of liquor illegally, of course. And having been the alderman in a neighborhood that was victim to a bait and switch concept, I think this was trying to lock down that, whereby a restaurateur opened up, they quickly received an excise license, and it turned into no food sales. Families went in to get something to eat, and they said, we don't have any food. The liquor license was extinguished, and then it was bring your own beer. Now, granted, this situation may be anecdotal, this situation may be rare, and I think it is in those rare cases, but I think this is an amendment that is, again, listening to those neighborhood associations who are trying to get a little more padded protection. I think that's all I need to say. Alderwoman, if you want to close in any further discussion on the amendment, otherwise we'll proceed to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to lift up what the Alderwoman from the 7th was saying. I mean, from Cherokee Street, having those small businesses, that I used to have the privilege of representing that part of St. Louis City, and the first thing I did when I was elected Alderwoman of the 20th Ward was to remove the liquor moratorium in that district, open up the bars and restaurants, which has really helped to revitalize that neighborhood. So I hear your concerns and especially wanting to support that small business community. That being said, I also know of that massive problem we had on Cherokee Street with that liquor licensee down the street earlier this year, when there was a shooting at Cherokee, at Cinco de Mayo, and couldn't pull that guy's liquor license. It was crazy. And the neighborhood around there is not quite as well organized as some of our other neighborhoods. The business district certainly is with the SID and everything, but just that nightmare that bad actor as a liquor licensee had was something I want to protect neighborhoods from. And I want to protect business districts like Cherokee Street from. And so that is the spirit with which I'm entertaining, kind of making sure that the food threshold is higher than some guy just selling snacks in the evenings and calling it a restaurant. I don't know exactly what the situation with the food there was, but I think it probably, I wouldn't know his sales. But in any case, I think protecting neighborhoods is the intent here, and I will renew my motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan.
No.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman.
No.
I'm sorry.
I believe that was Clark
That was
Hubbard.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, no.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Velazquez.
No.
Alderwoman Sanye. Chair Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. 2 aye votes, 4 no votes.
By the vote, you've failed to sustain the motion to adopt Amendment Number 6 on Board Bill Number 60, Committee Substitute as amended. Alderwoman from the 8th, you're recognized on your next amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Amendment number 8. What this does is really apply to the standards for granting the temporary license. What this does is really direct the excise commissioner to not only determine, in their initial determination. So let me just phrase this in my own words. It will ask the commissioner to not only determine that it will not have a detrimental effect, but actually issue a finding to that effect. So it just adds a little tighter language and a little more onus on the commissioner. It also gives a path for neighborhood organizations to have some recourse if they are actually a detriment. So this really tightens that language up and directs the excise commissioner to not only conclude that, but to actually issue a finding that they would not be a detriment to the neighborhood. I think it's fairly standard, a little cleanup and actually just a little tightening up of the language.
Great. Sorry, let's entertain a motion to adopt Amendment.
This is number 8.
Yep. It's been moved. Is there a second to adopt Amendment Number 8, Board Bill 60? Substitute. Looking for a second?
Second.
Seconded. Further discussion, Alderwoman, I keep, before you start your preamble, I keep wanting to make sure that the motion and then we just discussion. So I will adhere to that when we get to Amendment Number 9. If you have further discussion, otherwise I can proceed to the committee members. Okay. Alderman Narayan.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess I'll raise the same point for Amendment Number 8 as well as Amendment Number 9. We cover this on page 68, lines 1 through 5, where it says, upon the conclusion of any hearing, the excise commissioner shall issue findings of fact, conclusions of law, so on and so forth. So he already shall issue a finding. So this is 8 and 9 are a bit duplicative here, and so I would hesitate to adopt them just because I don't want to muddy the waters.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
No questions or comments, thank you.
Great.
Just a point of clarification.
Absolutely, Alderwoman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're looking at page 768. Page 68. I'm on page 68, right? And I don't know that matches. I just want to get the language. The change is minor, but I think tightens up in a way that I'd like to clarify. But I'm looking at 68, at the online version of the make copy to. My apologies, Mr. Chair. to say,
I have 68, line 1 starts with transcript requirements of the administrative hearing. Is that what you have?
on 68,
Yeah.
say that again. What does it start with? It might be
66, line 5, okay.
Line 5.
I see that about the nuisance properties.
So wait. I have 68, line 1, starting with transcript requirements. Do you see that? And that's in the Word version. So, but either way, a control F for, because it's in 14.06.025.
Also, Mr. Chair, I believe we're on Amendment 7. We had just passed number 6.
We're on amendment number 8.
We just passed number 6. Are you skipping?
I withdrew 7 because
Withdrew 7. Thank you.
Thank you. So I can find transcript, but I cannot.
Try Control F.
I did, but it's not. I know it's found it, but I can't. If you have do you have the language in front of you,
It's
Alderman Narayan?
I don't have a hard copy in front of me.
Because I think the clarification would be issuing the finding rather than.
68 also controls this. Bear with us here. I think it is important we get agreed upon.
Upon conclusion of any hearing, shall issue that includes law and order, setting forth the facts and law which support the determination regarding any. So.
But
So
okay.
that's in 66 and 17.
Okay, so the issue would be that, the excise commissioner makes it, what the current law reads is upon conclusion, the excise commissioner shall issue findings of fact, conclusions, and law and order, setting forth the facts and law, and what were initial. And adds to that, within that statement, right there after any initial license application, the following words which directs the commissioner to issue a finding to that effect.
So they already would, under this.
Well,
And that's at any hearing that they would do this, not just after.
This was, added again, this was suggested to tighten up the language, Chair, or Mr. Sponsor of the bill. So, I think it would be helpful. I think what it would do is just, add a direction that the commissioner adds a finding specific that the excise commissioner has determined that the applicant does not constitute a detriment. So I agree with you that what they're issuing is a finding on the front end of it. This just clarifies that the finding would be directed to be that the applicant is not a detriment to the community and specifies that. So I think it would be helpful to neighborhood to neighborhoods. So. Yeah. Again, I think this was a request, and I
Sure.
would appreciate the consideration of the committee on it.
Okay.
I think what it also would do is kind of tighten up the ability to take action if necessary, as a finding specific to not being a detriment to the community. It adds a little more onus on the excise commissioner, and I support having a little tighter control over that.
All right, thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Velasquez.
No questions.
Alderwoman Saunier. Here, okay. I have no questions either. Madam Clerk, let's proceed to the vote. Please call the roll.
Alderwoman Spencer,
Aye.
Alderman Narayan,
No.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys, Alderwoman Velasquez,
No.
Alderwoman Saunier, Alderman Oldenburg,
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys, Alderwoman Saunier, Alderwoman Saunier,
No?
three aye votes, 3 no votes.
By vote, you failed to sustain the motion to adopt Amendment Number 8, Board Bill 60 substitute. Alderwoman Spencer, please proceed with your next amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last two amendments go together. Amendment number, number 9 went with number 8, and then number 10 and 11 go together.
Okay.
What amendments number 10 and number 11 do is address.
Wait, I'm sorry, real quick. Are we on 9?
Number 9 went with number 8.
So you skip, understood. Thank you.
I'll skip number 9.
Before we proceed to 10 and or 11, can we entertain a motion to
So
adopt?
moved.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second to adopt Amendment Number 10, Board Bill 60, Committee Substitute?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please proceed, Alderwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll point out that amendments number 10 and 11 go together. What this does is address the issue of folks having a nuisance property or failing to pay their taxes. Right now, that applies to the entity that is applying for the liquor license. Typically speaking, when you're opening up a new restaurant, you open up a new LLC specific to that organization, so it wouldn't have delinquent taxes nor be a nuisance property anywhere. It's not even open. But what this does is specify and clarify that any affiliate members of that LLC, i.e. the people behind the LLC, not have any delinquent taxes or any nuisance properties. So I think this is an important distinction here, because without it, the nuisance property and tax delinquency is really meaningless, because as I pointed out, when you're opening up a restaurant, you open it up in, Tacos LLC, and that entity doesn't have any delinquency or any nuisance properties. But we want to make sure that if the person that's opening up that LLC is delinquent in taxes in Burrito, or what, I'm just making up a restaurant name here, I'm making this up. It has nothing to do with the food. But my point is, if they have a previous restaurant for which they are a nuisance or are delinquent in their taxes, this would apply to that and shore that up.
Okay. Excellent. We'll move through the committee members. Alderman Narayan.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a bit concerned just that we don't have definitions of affiliate or family member as a part of this. I understand what you're trying to do here, but I think we could be going down a really concerning road here, because family member. So if someone's brother's behind on taxes, then they can't they can't avail themselves to this. That's not at all what we're trying to do here, I don't think. But I think we need definitions of these two things so that it's clear what we're actually talking about.
I take your point on the family member. This is not the intent to prevent somebody who's got a brother or family member necessarily. But again, I think it's really important that when we're applying these standards of being current on your taxes and not having a nuisance property, that that they don't apply to the LLC, especially these newly formed LLC, but apply to the affiliates of the LLC of making that application. And so if what you'd like to do is remove family member.
I think we need to get a strong definition of affiliate, and then I just don't understand why family members at all personally. But I would need at least a real definition of affiliate, because that's very vague. It's just very vague.
As of right now, the language that we have is just as it relates to the applicant. And again, I think it's fairly meaningless when we're talking about a brand new restaurant, because a brand new restaurant, its LLC, again, would have no taxes or any new history. So putting that safety guard in there as we have right now is meaningless. And I think it is important that we shore it up.
I'm not opposed to that. I don't think we'd be shoring it up if we passed this as written without a definition of affiliate, is what I'm saying.
Alderman, you bring up a good point. I would, if willing, work with you from now until Friday to determine some language that could help shore that up. And I will remove my motion.
Happy to help with that. Yeah, definitely.
Mr. Chair, if I may take a moment, withdraw my motion on amendment number 10 and 11, and also just reiterate my to commend the sponsor for having this hearing. I think that, and the chair and the committee here, I think, and all the members of the public, only some 4 of which are here right now, but certainly this room has been filled with folks. I think we've built a lot of trust by having meetings. I commend Sarah Baker, the mayor's office, and yourself. I would have loved to have been included in those meetings, but I do recognize that they happened, and I think they were very important. And I think we've come to a place where better legislation is for us, and legislation that the community can feel a lot better about. It's our job to hear from members of the community, and I appreciate our actions here right now, hearing more from the community and really diving into issues, and I really appreciate that.
Sure. Alderwoman, before you, Mike, will you just withdraw your second? Because on Amendment 10, I think you were the second, just so we're officially.
Excuse me, that's right. It was.
And I withdraw my motion.
I withdraw my second.
Thank you. You withdraw your original motion, Alderwoman Velasquez. Thank you. So with that, sounds like the sponsor and Alderman Spencer are going to work on some language that further defines affiliate and family member. I would agree with Alderwoman Narayan's assessment of that. But I think the spirit is that a restaurant owner who is delinquent or otherwise a bad actor operator can't go to another part of town and open. And we're not piercing the veil of that limited liability corporation of ownership. So affiliate family member to be continued. With that, Alderman Narayan, if you want, you're recognized to close on Board Bill Committee Substitute as amended.
Thank you, Chairman.
I'd like you to take the podium there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I think we've had a pretty solid discussion here in committee today on this. We've been able to institute the vast majority of the feedback that we got from the 21 neighborhood associations is now included in this. There's again, no one has gotten everything that they've wanted here. The excise division didn't get everything they wanted. I didn't get everything I wanted. The neighborhoods didn't. The administration didn't. But that's usually a sign that we've reached pretty solid compromises. I remain committed to working with Alderwoman Spencer on that last issue with the definition of affiliate, because I think that's an important piece of the puzzle to address here. as far as enforcement goes, but we need to make sure that we get that right. And with that, I would ask for your favorable consideration and passing Board Bill 60 Committee Sub as amended, out with a do pass recommendation.
I make a motion that we pass Board Bill Committee Sub 60 Committee Substitute as amended with a do pass recommendation.
It's been moved and seconded that we move to pass out Board Bill 60 Committee Substitute as amended. Madam Clerk, please do call the roll.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Velazquez.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye. Chair Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderwoman Keys. You have 6 aye votes.
With that, you have passed out Board Bill with a do pass recommend. We have adopted Board Bill 60 Committee Substitute as amended with a do pass recommendation. I want to thank everybody for coming. Let me see if my agenda, we're going to strike the line items until we get down to adjournment. So I will recognize a motion to.
Make a motion that we
4 people in opposition and 2 in support for Board Bill 60.
Okay.
That's written comments.
Let's make sure that makes it to the minutes. Alderwoman Saunier, do you have
I make a motion
been
that we
recognized?
adjourn.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you all.